Hello YouTube, my name is Daniel and welcome back to the 5th episode in my Jetpack Compose Notes app series. So in the last episode we created the Note Create page and also the Note Edit page. In this video we're going to be creating the Notes List page. So to get started I'm going to go over to the UI package and create a new package called Note List. Inside this package we will create another Kotlin file and we will call this Note List. We can remove the class body as this will just be a composable function. And to get started I'm just going to copy and paste a few things from the previous composable, which is the create note page. So we still want the suppress annotation and the compose annotation. And we still want the photo notes theme as well. So everything up to the first column, I'm going to copy and paste that. And just add 3 brackets and that should be okay. And inside this one here, this is where the extra columns and extra composables for the list view will go. So this composable will be called Note List Screen. We still want to pass the nav controller and the view model as our parameters. We can remove the get image request and I'm just going to change a few of these mutable states. So the first one will be delete text. This is the text that's going to be shown in our delete dialog. That will remain an empty string. The next one will be the notes query. This is going to be the query that the user types into the search bar. This will again be an empty string. And then we will name this one notes to delete. So if the user decides to delete multiple notes, this state will be filled with those notes. And that will be a mutable state of list of notes. And just make sure to add the type in there and then just run the import. And the next one will be the open dialog state. So this will be the state we will use to show the delete dialog. And that will be a mutable state of false. We then want to declare our notes list, which will be notes, and we can get that from the view model, viewModel.notes, and then we can use observe as state. So our composable will observe the notes table, and then any updates to that notes table will cause the composable to update and show the new state. After that, we can declare the context, which will be local context.current. Now for the surface, we're going to change the color. We will use the primary color. We still want the generic app bar, but we're going to be using a string resource for the title, and that will be the app name, which will be photo notes. For the icon and the icon clip, this will be where we will handle the delete button logic. So we're just going to check here if notes.value is not empty equals true. Then we want to set the open dialog .value to true to show our delete dialog. Then we want to set the delete text to are you sure you want to delete these notes? Actually, it's probably best if we say delete all notes, as this will select all notes and delete them. Next, we want to set notes to delete .value as the entire list, so notes.value or an empty list. Otherwise, we want to show a toast message. we can pass in the context. And the message for this will be no notes found. And the length of the message will be short. So toast.length short. And then we want to show that message. And that is it for the on icon click. For the icon, we will still use an image vector, but the resource will be the note delete. The content description will be delete note. Color will still remain black, and the icon state will be remember mutable state of true, as we always want to show this icon. For the floating action button, we will still use the notes fab, but this will be used to create a note. So the string resource will be create note. The action, we use the nav controller to navigate to the note create screen, and we'll use one of our roots, which will be constants dot navigation underscore notes underscore create, and we'll just create that root now. And this will just say note create. And the drawable for this will be note add icon. And we'll create the actual notes fab composable later on. And then before we start laying out this page, we're actually going to go outside of this composable and start creating the individual items of this page, such as the search bar, the notes fab, and also the notes list. So first we'll start with the search bar, just add a bit more space. So the search bar will be a composable. This will take a single parameter, which will be a query, and that will be a mutable state of string. This will return a column. And first off, we need to define some padding. So that'll be 12 dp for the top. $12 for the start, 12 dp for the end, and 0 dp for the bottom. Let's run that import. And inside there, we're going to have a text field. Put these on all separate lines. The value will be query.value. So whenever the query gets updated, the text field will show the query's value. Then we want to define the placeholder, which will be a text composable, and the text will just be search. Next, we need to set the max lines parameter, as we only want to have one line of text in the search bar, and then the on value change. And this will assign whatever the user types in the query box to the value of the query. And then we need to make some adjustments to the text field by using the modifier. First, we want to set the background to white. Next, we want to clip the search bar to have rounded corners. We can do this by using the clip modifier. and then pass in the corner radius, which would be 12 dp. And next we want it to fill the max width. And that is it for the modifier. We can then set up the colors. And this will be text field defaults dot text field colors. And inside here we want to define the text color, which will be black. Then we will have a trailing icon for the search bar clear button, and we want to use animated visibility for this because we want the clear button to only appear when the search bar is being used. And we can do this by checking whether the query is not empty. And then we want to define the enter parameter, which will be fade in, and the exit parameter, which will be fade out. So as the user starts to type, the clear button will fade in, and if they click the button, it will then start to fade out. Inside here, we then put our icon button. The on click will just set the query to empty, so query.value equals empty string. And inside here, we want an icon. The content description will be a string resource, which will use r.string.clear search. And for the image vector, we want to pass in one of our drawables. So image vector, vector resource, and the drawable is icon cross. And that is it for the trailing icon. And that is it for the search bar composable. Now we can move on to the notes list. So at composable notes list. This will take a list of notes. Just don't forget to add fun at the top. And the open dialog mutable state. So that will be a mutable state of Boolean. Then the query, which will be a mutable state of string. Then the delete text, which again is a string. Then the nav controller, and then finally the notes to delete, which will be a mutable state of a list of notes. Then we can add the function body. And first off, we want to set a value for the previous header. And this is for when we have the section headers for the dates of the note, as we only want to have one header for each day. And if a note is created on the same day, we do not want to create a second header for that. And that will just be an empty string. Next, we want to define a lazy column for our list. And first we want to set our content padding, which will be padding values 12 dp, so 12 dp around each item. And we then want to set a modifier for the background color, which will be material theme .colors.primary. And then we can pass in our content. So first off, we need to define what notes we want to show in the list. So if the user has typed in a query, we want to filter the list to that query. Otherwise, we want to show the whole list of notes. So we will define that here. So queried notes will be the name of our content. And we can decide this by checking if the query is empty. So if query.value is empty, then we want to show our notes in the list. Otherwise, we want to filter the notes. So notes.filter. And we want to check it.note if it contains the query or the note title contains the query. Then, once we have our queried notes, we can add them to our list. And to do that, we want to use the items index method, as we want to access the index of our items. And we want to pass in our queried notes. And now we want to check and in the function body, we can set our index and the note. And now we want to check whether the day the note was created is different to our previous day. So if note.getDay. So now we want to check if the date that the note was created is different from the date of our previous header. To do this, I'm going to create an extension function so we can use it on every note. And that will be called note.getDay. Now first, it's going to check if the day is empty, then we're just going to return an empty string. So if this .date updated is empty, return empty string. Otherwise, we will format the date to a specific, to just show the day. And we can do this by first defining the formatter that it was created. So formatter equals date time formatter dot of pattern. And then we want to pass in this pattern up here. And then we can use that to format our date to just show the day. So local datetime dot pass this dot date updated, and then the formatter to local date, and then we can format it. And we just want to use date time formatter of pattern, and then we're just going to change the characters. So we still want the year, the month, the day, and we just remove the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. And then we just need to make sure that this returns type string. Now we can get back to the notes list. So if note.getDay is not equal to the previous header, then we want to add our note item. Then we want to add our header, which will be a column. We're padding of 6 dp. And this will fill the max width. Inside here, we want a text composable. Which will just show the day of the note, so note.getDay. And the color of this will be black. Underneath the column, we want to add a spacer, which will fill the max width. And we want to set a height for 6 dp. And underneath that if check, we want to actually create our note list item. This will be a composable that we'll create in a second. So note list item, and we want to pass in our parameters. The first parameter will be the note, the open dialog, the delete text, the notes to delete, and the notes background. And this will be the background colors, and this will be done using an if check. So if the position is even, we want it to be yellow, otherwise we will use the blue color. And we can do this with this check here. So %, 2 equals 0, and this is checking if the index is modular 2. So if it's divisible by 2 all the way down to 0, we know it's an even number. We know it's an even number, and we want to set the color to yellow. So that would be note BG yellow. Otherwise, note BG blue. And after this composable, we want another spacer, which we can copy and paste. And that would just be a height of 12 dp. Now, underneath here, we can start creating our notes list item. So at composable, note list item. And we want to pass in our note, the open dialog, the delete text, and then we also want our nav controller, the note background, which is of type color, and the notes to delete. We then will add our function body, and we just want to add in the nav controller just before the background, and we just move our notes to delete down here so we don't have to use named parameters. And now we can start creating our note list item. So first off, this will be a box, and we'll add a modifier to this so we can set a height, which will be 120 dp. And then we want to clip that to a rounded corner shape with 12 dp corner radius. And inside that box, we want a column. A modifier, and now we want to set the background to the note background, the height to 120 dp, and we want this list item to be both clickable in terms of a long press for deleting the item and also the normal press for navigating to the note detail page. We can do this by using the combined clickable method. The interaction source will be remember mutable states, will be remember mutable interaction source, and now we can define a few details here. So next we have the indication, which will be remember ripple, and this is to add a ripple effect. And we want to set bonded to false. Then for the onClick, we want to check first if the note ID is not equal to 0, as that will be the ID of the placeholder. Then we want to navigate to that note, so navigate, note detail navigation, and we want to pass in the note ID. Or 0. Then for the long click, we want to set up the deleting of the note, and we can do this by checking if note.id is not equal to 0. We want to set the open dialog.value to true, the delete text value to are you sure you want to delete this note, and the notes to delete value will just be a list of this single note. And now we've done that, we can actually set up the content in our note list item. We'll use a row for this with no modifier. And first off, we need to check if this note has an image or not, and if it does have an image, we want to show it. So that will be if note.image URI is not null, and that is not an empty string. Then we want to define an image. Let's put these on separate lines. So for the painter, it will be the remember async image painter. Then we want to pass in an image request. .builder, and pass in the context, which will be local context.current. The data will be URI.pass note.image URI, and then we can call the build method. The content description we're just going to set to null, as we do not know what the image will be. And then we want to set a modifier which will just fill a third of the width of the item, so 0.3f. And now we want to set up our text widgets to show the title of the note and also a preview, and this will be done in a column. And we'll have 3 text widgets. The first one will be for the title, so the value will be note.title. Then we will have the color, which will be black. The font weight will be bold. And then the modifier, which will be some padding. And that would just be horizontal 12 dp. As we want this to be 12 dp away from the image. And then we can copy and paste this 2 more times for the body and the date. So the next one will be the body, so note.note. The color will be black. We will not have a font weight, but we will have a max lines, which will be 3. Padding will be 12 dp all around, so you can move the horizontal parameter. And the next one will be the date updated, so when the note was last updated. Color will still be black. We won't have any max lines or any font weight, and it will still be 12 dp horizontal padding. And that is it for the note list item. We can now create the notes fab. For the fab button, we will have 3 parameters. The first will be the content description, which will be a string, the icon, which will be an int, as it will be a drawable ID, and the next one will be the action, so the action that will happen when the button is clicked, which will be a function without a return type, so a Kotlin unit. So for this, we want to return a floating action button. The onClick will be action.invoke. And then we want to add a background color, which will be material theme.colors.primary, which will be black. Then inside the content, we want to add an icon. The image vector will be image vector.vector resource. Then we want to pass in the ID, which will be the icon, and just make sure that's in lowercase. Then the content description, followed by the tint, which will be black. And that is everything for the notes fab. We can now work on the delete dialog. So composable, delete dialog. This will take 4 parameters. First, the open dialog, the text, which will be a string, followed by the action, and the notes to delete. Next, we want to check if the open dialog value is true, because we want to show the composable if it is. Then we will set up an alert dialog. The onDismiss request will be if the open dialog value is false. Then we want to set up the title, which will be a text composable. Which will say delete note. Then for the text, it will be the delete text. So we're going to have a column, a single text widget saying text.value. Then for the buttons, we want a row composable with some padding of 8 dp on all sides and a horizontal arrangement of center. And inside here we will have a column, and this will contain our buttons. So first off, we want to add a modifier which will fill the max width. And then the button colors Use button default dot button colors, and then want to define the background color, which will be color.black. And then the content color, which will be color.white. Then the onClick will be action.invoke. Set the dialog value to false. And then reset the notes to an empty list. So notes to delete dot value equals an empty list. And inside here, we just want a single text composable with the word yes. Followed by a spacer. With 12 dp padding. And then we can copy and paste the button, as there'll be a similar button just with a few different actions. For the text, it will be no. The onClick will set the open dialog value to false, and the notes to delete to an empty list. Colors will remain the same, modifier will remain the same, and the padding will also remain the same. And that's all we need for the alert dialog. And now we can go ahead and set up our notes page. So if we scroll all the way back up to our notes page composable, and just after the flow in action button, inside these curly braces, we want to have a single column without a modifier, pass in our search bar with the query, which will be notes query, then the notes list. The notes will be notes.value, and then we need to add another function to check whether if the list is null, and if it is null, we will show a placeholder. If it isn't, then we will show the value of the notes. And this function, we will define it in our note data class, as it will be another extension function. This will be called all placeholder list. So this will be list note, and it will be nullable, or placeholder list. And what we'll do here is we'll just set up a dummy list. So val placeholder list equals list of notes. Title for this note will be cannot find note details. This will be the same for the body. And then in our extension function, we want to check if this is not null and this is not empty, then we want to return the list, otherwise we'll return the placeholder, which will be placeholder list. And we just need to make sure the return is set. And now we can go back to our notes list screen and add in that function. So, or placeholder list. Open dialog will be the open dialog value. Then we'll have the note query, followed by the delete text, the nav controller, and the notes to delete. Then after our column, we just want to add in the delete dialog, as this will show across the whole screen. and we just need to pass in the parameters. So firstly, we'll have the open dialog, the delete text, then the notes to delete, then for the action it will be notes to delete dot value, and then we'll loop for all of the notes and then call viewModel dot delete note and then pass in that note. And that is everything created for the note list screen. In the next video, we'll set up the main activity, and then we'll just be testing the app and making sure that everything's okay. If you have any questions, please post them down in the comments. Please like the video and please subscribe.